The welcoming party had reached the central airport in Moscow well ahead of the arrival of the guests. It was the late afternoon of October the 18th, 1943, and with the night temperatures hovering around freezing level, unusually cold even by Moscow standards. Vyacheslav Molotov, the Soviet foreign minister, a stocky man with a square jaw, a Mexican-style moustache and glasses perched on his slightly pointed nose, was getting cold. So were his numerous deputies, the officers and soldiers of the honor guard, and the musicians of the brass band. Although the airport was less than 5 miles from the Kremlin, a 15-minute drive at most for a government motorcade, Molotov had not wanted to take any risks, and came early. The guests he was to receive were U.S. Secretary of State Cordell Hull and British Foreign Secretary Anthony Eden. With time on their hands, Molotov and his party found shelter from the chilly weather in the airport building, the first terminal in the Soviet Union to become operational. The airport, popularly known as Khodinka, after the Khodinka field where in May 1896 more than 1,300 people had been trampled to death by festive crowds celebrating the coronation of the last Russian emperor, Nicholas II, was the cradle of Soviet aviation. In 1922, 5 years after the revolution, and only 1 year after the end of the subsequent civil war, the victorious Bolsheviks had launched their first international flight to Königsberg and Berlin from Khodinka Field. Russia and Germany, the two international outcasts at the end of World War I, were looking to the future together, and the sky was anything but the limit to their cooperation. On the contrary, it offered opportunities to enhance their relations. 17 years later, in August 1939, Hitler's foreign minister, Joachim von Ribbentrop, flew to Moscow by the same route to sign the pact with Molotov that provided for a German-Soviet condominium in Europe and launched World War II. Now, at the very airport where Ribbentrop had landed only 4 years earlier, Molotov awaited the arrival of new allies. The Soviet Union needed Cordell Hull and Anthony Eden to help defeat its erstwhile ally, Germany. Contrary to all assurances, Hitler had invaded the Soviet Union in June 1941, and by December of that year his troops had advanced all the way to Moscow, a few dozen miles from the capital's airport. But now the situation was not so dire. The Red Army had driven the Germans back from Moscow in December 1941, and in February 1943, with the help of American supplies pouring into the USSR under Roosevelt's Lend-Lease program, defeated them at Stalingrad. The tide of war had turned in favor of the Soviets. Yet the prospect of victory was still distant. In October 1943, the Red Army was still fighting the Germans in the middle of Ukraine, and getting ready to attack Hitler's eastern wall, the defensive line along the Dnieper. That river, as wide as 700 meters or 2,300 feet in places, was a formidable obstacle. Nikolai Gogol's claim in his novel of Cossack life, Taras Bulba, "Rare is the bird that flies to the middle of the Dnieper," was no idle observation. The Battle of the Dnieper, which had begun in August 1943 and would continue into early winter, would cost the Red Army up to 350,000 officers and soldiers dead, with total casualties of almost 1.5 million. With victories like that, the Red Army could soon run out of men. The Soviet leaders needed American help.